Hi, this is Dark Journalist. Today I have something special for you. It's part 2 of my deep discussion with former Assistant Housing Secretary Catherine Austin Fitts. Now, in part 1, we covered Catherine's fascinating new report on emerging trends in space and some of the covert forces behind them. In part 2, I asked her to give us her insights into what is really behind all of this massive secrecy around NASA, the space program, and advanced technology, and her answers may surprise you. Now, planet Earth as a culture may be on the verge of discovering that there is a highly advanced off-world civilization out there flagrantly buzzing our skies. And if that weren't disturbing enough, apparently an entirely invisible government has emerged to handle this challenge and benefit from it while keeping the public completely out of the loop. You won't find this on CNN. Here we go. Former Assistant Housing Secretary Catherine Austin Fitts, the UFO Economy 3.0, Part 2, Offworld Secrets.
Because clearly, if you look at the UFOs coming into our airspace, you know, from what I can tell, that's about $150 trillion of hardware that we've just, you know, we have video on. Where's it being built? You know, it's either coming from another planet or galaxy, or, you know, we've got an incredible manufacturing infrastructure that we don't know about.
You know, the UFO question has really been with us for a long time, but it was the massive wave of sightings in 1947 that culminated in the famous Roswell incident that really gives us a starting point for investigation. Presidents, astronauts, pilots, and respected members of every walk of society have tried to tell us for years that there is a separate presence here and in orbit with advanced technology, and that at the most secret level our governments are aware of it. Is the UFO and the advanced technology it represents the ultimate missing puzzle piece from our dysfunctional deep state and black budget past? That's what we're here to find out.
Dark Journalist will go there. The deepest issues, the hardest stories, the biggest secrets. The truth is never easy. With top guests, like former Assistant Housing Secretary Catherine Austin Fitts.
Catherine, who is really behind this media censorship?
Internet feeds go through satellites. Who controls the satellites? It's the Pentagon.
Legendary investigator Graham Hancock.
Graham, this cataclysm must have destroyed an advanced culture and our ancient past.
It truly was an extinction-level event. It was accompanied by massive animal extinctions. It was accompanied by huge and unexplained sea level rises, and then a sudden plunge of global temperatures.
Best-selling author Jim Marrs.
Jim, don't these elite corporate owners need us around to buy their GMO food? Why would they want to depopulate?
Because they are eugenicists and they believe that they need to purify the human race. And if that sounds like the Nazis, that's exactly what it is.
Coast to Coast AM investigative reporter Linda Moulton Howe.
Linda, how are we going to scale that wall of UFO secrecy?
Humans themselves are bypassing, are beginning to dismiss all of the policies of denial and lies.
Dark Journalist will go there. Visit darkjournalist.com and subscribe now for a special winter discount available for just $39 for 1 full year. You'll not only receive access to the complete audio archives to stream or download at your convenience, you'll also get exclusive subscriber-only content and Dark Journalist event discounts. Sign up for our free newsletter to stay updated on the latest shows. Dark Journalist. Let's get the real story in 2016.
You know, we need dark journalists, so just keep doing what you're doing.
Catherine, it's great to have you back for part 2 of the UFO Economy 3.0. Now, we left off discussing the impact of excessive secrecy in an ostensibly open society. But we should also mention that there's sometimes a terrible price that's paid by those who bring forth some real facts and sort of blow the cover of this secrecy. And I know you've had some experience with that personally.
What I call shadow work. What they do is your day, think of your day as a process. And let's say in that process you make 10 calls, send 20 emails, and type up and send 1 file, and then browse 10 things. What they're trying to do is a guy who plays ball with them His emails always go through. His file always goes through. His, he has no problem browsing. Yours is designed so you pick up a virus every other time you go to a browser. Your emails 2 out of 10 get lost. If you really piss them off, then 5 out of 10 get lost. Your phones have clicking sounds so people get nervous. And what it does is it dramatically increases the average time of each step for you versus somebody who plays ball. It's what I call shadow work. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And you have this constant low-level interference. It's all done with artificial intelligence. You're just like, okay, let's put Daniel on plan B. He's been bad this week. Put him on plan B, and and it's all very subtly done. It's very finely tuned to eat your time and money in thousands of tiny little ways. And it's very effective. So 25% of my overhead, I estimate, is the cost of shadow work.
Wow, that really is a lot.
And so you have to organize your whole operation around the people who will work for you, who are prepared to deal with living in spiritual warfare 24/7, and managing that kind of shadow work. Because a lot of people say, well, let's do it that way. And I'll say, no, I want to do it this way. And they say, well, that's much more, complicated and time consuming, but I'm building in redundancy so that the shadow work can't hiccup me.
Right.
So it's that's why people don't do what you and I do. They don't want to have to deal with that. My attitude is, it's just part of economic warfare, because most of what I'm dealing with is not the government, it's media.
Yeah.
I think we're basically dealing with the top media guys, and they're the ones, this is primarily a private, now it's public-private, they work closely together, but I don't think my problem is government. I think the problem is the media guys. And they steal everything.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, when you look at the kind of secrecy that's required to build a covert system of finance and to guard the secrets of advanced technology, and also when you look at that great chasm between the official reality and the emerging truths on some of these topics, are those in control of the cover-up now sort of living in a fantasy?
Probably. I don't think all of them, but I think most of them. And, because their access to information is also, it's amazing when I get in a boardroom how much I can teach people. Most people are very busy. They're in their box. They're being told to make money at their submolecular level within their box. And so it's remarkable how many people don't have a really rich picture now. I think the internet is changing that, but I also think you're seeing people who've been so spoiled by their privilege that they've lost touch with reality.
So they're really living in a haze.
Yeah, no, it's pretty bad.
I think if we focus on the cover-up and what it's doing, and all the different levels of media that it's penetrating and controlling, it really is a fascinating enigma. Of course, one of the main objects of the secrecy is to hide our interactions with an advanced civilization out there. But also, we can see that it's probably the reason for our covert weaponization of space in programs like Star Wars to deal with that.
Right.
Now, we've had whistleblowers come forward to talk about this. One of them, Lieutenant Colonel Philip Corso, said that the military had engaged actively in re-engineering the technology from UFO crashes. So to what extent is the space economy really a UFO economy? How much of it is a cover for us to be able to put up our technology in space to defend ourselves against something that we see basically dominating our skies?
Well, I think the entire economy organizes around the need for that activity. So I think it is the defining variable within the economy. I think our entire economy is a space-based economy, because when you have to produce that much money in secret, everything organizes around that fact. Okay, so you have, the narcotics trafficking and the war on drugs and the war on terrorism and all these crazy, illogical, bizarre activities. And as the secrecy grows, you're having to manage markets. You can't allow markets to be free. On and on and on. So if you look at how we've managed the federal budget, the federal credit, and centralized the economy and centralized control of the economy, and then created all these cover stories so that we could continue to centralize the economy and pretend it's one thing when it's another. I just think our whole economy is organized around the reality of what's going on in space and our dealing with it. And that fact is entirely invisible. And if I said it to most sophisticated financial people, they'd look at me like, what are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've come to that conclusion because I spent 20 years following the string of where the money was going and why everyone was behaving the way they were behaving. And it took me 20 years to kind of integrate the story and present it. And that's what this wrap up is. It's my presentation that says, we've been in a space-based economy since 1947 and 1949 when they passed the NSA and the CIA Act. And what it's done is, if you take that center point we created with 47, 49, it's like it keeps sucking in more and more and more until the whole system revolves around producing that dividend. I said at Secret Space Program, planet Earth is a reed, and it's all about producing that dividend that disappears down this hole, and the whole thing organizes around not only doing it, but keeping it secret and keeping everybody out of the know.
That's fascinating.
And when you look at the design of the federal credit and federal budget to produce all of this and how it organizes in the intelligence agencies and the secret societies and the whole system, it's phenomenal. You got to give them credit. They have created what is, from a knowledge management and financial management system, an amazing system. Because if you said to me, could you do this? I would say it's impossible. You could never do this with 325 million people. You just couldn't. You couldn't do it. But they've done it.
Oh, wow.
They've done it. It's quite amazing. We have an entire multiple personality disorder society that functions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really amazing.
Painful.
Yeah. Well, there's always something to pay for that schizophrenia, that disassociation, unleashing that construction of a false reality, a false paradigm. And when that collides with real truth or real facts, then it's like matter and antimatter exploding, just whoosh.
Here's what's amazing, and you see it in the campaigns. We had a housing bubble that involved all the realtors, all the mortgage bankers, all the home builders, all the bankers, everybody, almost many of the lawyers, okay? But we didn't do it. They did it.
Right.
It's all Alan Greenspan and Bob Rubin's and Hillary Clinton's fault. Now, yes, all those three people did it, but to think that they could do it without the active leadership of all the local real estate professionals, but they did it.
Yes, so there's a real lack of owning up to our role when these things happen, and a tendency to project this failing outward onto the worst elements of our political leadership. But the truth is, those forces can't do anything without us on some level.
Right. In other words, the drug business is run one county at a time. Mortgage fraud is run one county at a time. It can't go on unless you have hundreds of thousands of people running it. And it's so amazing to me because, when I first got to where I live, was trying to unpack and see how the drug business worked and sort of how the mechanisms and money. And it was great. I used to have a trainer who used to deal drugs here. And I used to get him to unpack all the economics and teach me, okay, this, just trying to understand how the whole thing works. And when you realize that, this is one of the biggest businesses here, and yet if you sit at a cocktail party or a potluck dinner, everybody pretends that it's not happening and they're not doing it. Their friends and neighbors aren't doing it. And it's amazing to see the denial.
Yeah.
It's just,
it is intriguing.
and that has to take a huge drain on, I won't go into more of it because I don't want to be shot this weekend, but it's,
Bless you. Well, with this report, you're in enough trouble already. Now, you ask a very interesting question in the report, which is the global economy an open system or not an open system? What do you think is the answer?
I think it's an open system. I don't know how open it is, but I think it's an open system. I really do.
So something else is involved and actively engaged in our economy.
It's either, we have bases on Mars, and so we're trading. But it's the financial system is open, and if you look at how they're working to centralize it, I think it's because they want to be able to trade multiplanetary. So they need the financial system here to be capable of being, liquid with other planets, and for that mechanism to work.
Let's go a little deeper into that. If you're the United States and you have bases on Mars and you have teams of people there already in a kind of biosphere environment, and of course, we know about Gary McKinnon's revelations, the NASA hacker who found lists of off-world officers that would suggest we already have fleets of people out there now colonizing space.
Right.
Then what's the end game?
I don't know. I mean, I will tell you, Daniel, if I was Mr. Global, I would make it an absolute priority to become a multiplanetary civilization, because you never want to bet the ranch on one planet. It doesn't make any sense. And for all I know, the human population is already multiplanetary, and Earth's been quarantined for some reason. Who knows? I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
But as a risk manager, I would make it an unbelievably high priority to become a multiplanetary civilization. And, both for risk management issues, but also because, I think if we're going to evolve as a species, we need to grow. And certainly if you look at how we're running the economy here, it's not sustainable. I believe it could be, but, I don't have the intelligence to make a definitive judgment. That's just a guess. So I think it is very important we become a multiplanetary civilization. The big 64,000 question is who and what else is out there.
Yeah. Because
clearly, if you look at the UFOs coming into our airspace, I've said this before on your show, from what I can tell, that's about $150 trillion of hardware that
Right.
we've just, we have video on. Where's it being built? And unless we have a much more enormous underground manufacturing infrastructure that I know of, and maybe we do, I don't know. It's either coming from another planet or galaxy, or, we've got an incredible manufacturing infrastructure that we don't know about. I told you I have one subscriber who keeps emailing me and saying they're holograms. So, it's not 150 trillion, it's only 2 trillion. Well, it could be holograms, but then somebody can make holograms of that quality and run them all over the planet. So
yes, and you ask the real question and make the real point in the space report, which is whether you believe they're manufactured here by a breakaway civilization deep in the military, or we have an off-world culture that's really engaged here. Either way, we've got to deal with the reality of this phenomena to get a clear picture of what's really happening out there. Whatever someone wants to believe about them, they represent advanced technology and incredible investment.
They represent an incredible investment, incredible advanced technology. So we're dealing with a separate one or more separate populations who are far more advanced than we are. And of course, one of the problems with that, if you look at what's going on, it almost looks like there's a crash program to bring us up to their level of sophistication. Because historically, whenever a very advanced population meets a more primitive population, it doesn't bode well for the primitive.
Mm-hmm.
So part of what could be happening is, you use Star Wars to protect while you try and bring our civilization up. You can't bring everybody, so you try and focus on elite, and you bring them up fast. So who knows? I don't know. The problem is there's so much conjecture. Once you try and guess what's going on, you can get lost in the conjecture. And that's why so much of my focus is I stay focused on the money, because the money leaves a trail that's not conjecture, it's nuts and bolts. But the other thing is, it's so important that we bring, we close this divergence. And so that's what I was trying to do with the annual wrap up for people who really want to understand what this is and how it integrates now into their everyday life. Because, it's so funny. I have so many people who become subscribers. This is the typical note I get. And I always get it 6 months to a year after they subscribe. It says, "Hi, I'm a highly successful," you fill in the blank. It's a doctor, lawyer, financial advisor, investor. They tend to be people who have their own business or practice, very entrepreneurial. And they say, "I subscribed because my world made no sense. And I finally decided, okay, I'm going to figure out what's going on." And then I read, and they have to do a lot of reading because we deal with it at a level of complexity. And now my world makes total sense. Not a Slurry report because everything makes sense. But from now on, I'm just reading the wrap-ups because I'm really busy. I love all your stuff, but I'm just reading the wrap-ups.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
just reading the wrap-ups is a way to go for sure.
Right. So what happens is they come in because this, this Orwellian disassociation between a reality and official reality is driving them crazy, and it's causing their anxiety to go to the moon. And then they come in, and after about 6 to 12 months, their anxiety goes away, and they're like, "Oh, okay, now I understand." And it's really this kind of messed up, but I can laugh about it.
Right.
And they kind of calm down and go on about their business, read the wrap-ups. So and they participate with us in what I call the great governance mistress. Who is Mr. Global? Where does he live? What's really going on?
Definitely. Well, let me
Right.
ask you for a little conjecture here, understanding what you've laid out about getting lost in the labyrinth of possibilities. But you do have informed insight around these deep topics that can go so much further than just the facts on the ground. So I want to ask you about this period in the 90s where we had Clinton in office, and Clinton set up meetings with Lawrence Rockefeller, who was the Rockefeller most interested or even obsessed with the UFO question. And he has a kind of disclosure initiative at the time to get the truth about alien life out there. And the whole feeling in the 90s is that forces behind the scenes are toying around with the idea of coming out with the info on the off-world visitors.
Right, and that's when I got that inquiry of somebody trying to persuade me that, when I was invited to have lunch with aliens. I think that was part of this.
That's when you were participating in the Navy think tank program on how human society would react to the knowledge of an extraterrestrial presence. And as you've mentioned, high-level military and intelligence officials were participating on that also.
Right, so the study they were working on is what happens if the average person understands that aliens exist and live among us.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the study either that they were going to do for the Navy or they were going to do for their general white paper for the year. So they were clearly, and it was the former head of the CIA and a lot of retired admirals and generals. So, generally what they do on something like that is that, if they're playing around with the idea, they'll have the retired people, not the people currently on the line. So I'm assuming that's what it was part of.
Yeah.
It was toying around disclosure. Yeah.
Disclosure. Yeah, absolutely. Now, obviously, the conclusion they reached was not to come forward and disclose.
Right.
And one of the things that Joseph Farrell likes to point out when he's on the show is how the UFO is on a higher secrecy level than the Manhattan Project was with the atom bomb.
Right.
So whatever it is, with that kind of secrecy, it's very difficult to unwind it and see the real picture. Of course, we even had studies in the early 60s by the Brookings Institute on behalf of NASA and the government that addressed the question of could society handle the reality of the existence of extraterrestrials. And they decided we weren't ready, but should be prepared in any case for it.
Right.
So even in the early 1950s, if we go back there and take a look, we have President Truman at press conferences, and he's commenting openly on the wave of UFO sightings out there. So there are these periods of openness on it, for sure. And actually, in some ways, they dealt with it more openly back at that time.
Right.
So now, if we fast forward, by the time we get to the 90s, it appears they're getting ready to release some parts of the secret anyway. The Clintons are seen with Lawrence Rockefeller, as we discussed, and Webb Hubbell, who's Clinton's assistant attorney general, famously said in his biography that President Clinton sent him over to the Justice Department to find any information on UFOs and report it back to him. But these forces looking to adopt some policy of openness, even they aren't able to scale the wall of UFO secrecy. So now, 20 years after all this, we've been in a terrible period of obfuscation and secrecy around this topic. But now there are some hints that these forces in corporate and media circles are developing some narrative that may look like they're getting ready for engaging on this. Now, are we entering a new period with regards to space, or will they just keep up with the secrecy and keep it going forever?
Daniel, I don't know, and that's probably because their discussions are emergent and organic, and they don't really know. One of the reasons you've wanted to keep a lid on this is because you've kept the basic model of the reserve currency, a dollar, an oil standard, oil and gas. And you've kept the planet operating on a legacy oil and gas technology when clearly we have more advanced technology. And I don't think you want to bring that down until you have plans for replacing the oil standard on the currency. And something's going on with the energy model right now, clearly. And so the energy model is evolving, and I think it's going to be hard for disclosure or for leadership to support disclosure faster than the energy model evolves. Because if you were to do full disclosure, then you're going to play havoc with the energy model when you're not ready to, okay? Mm-hmm. Which plays havoc with the currency when you're not ready to. And so the disclosure is tied up with the evolution of the energy model and the evolution of the currency model. And I think the U.S. had a plan on how they were going to do it using, I believe they were going to try and go to a food standard. That failed. It's not working. And so things have gotten very complicated in terms of the evolution of energy and food. If you look at what's been happening in the last year with both solar and nuclear fusion, both the Chinese, and our defense contractors, it's moving. The energy model is migrating one way or the other. Boeing just got up at the Super Bowl and said, in 2116, it's 100% solar. Now, whether that's true or not, but, it's really not good for, the oil and gas business. Wow. So, they announced at the Super Bowl that oil and gas is toast. And, they said 100 years, but I think it's much faster. So,
does this have something to do with this incredibly low oil price that we're seeing now?
It may not. The oil price is driven by the fracking technology going global, by quantitative easing financing, beaucoup fracking in this country to create real strong national self-sufficiency on the oil and gas side. Digital technology is helping by optimizing sort of trade between bits and atoms. And then you have the global slowdown. So you can explain, and then you have, of course, the oil card against Russia. So you can explain the low price through all of those things. But the reality is we've seen the Germans and Chinese come out with nuclear fusion. Lockheed and Northrop have both said they have it. And, we have the announcements in solar, and not just in solar technology, but in material sciences and battery technology that's going to make solar unbelievably competitive within a relatively short period of time. So all of these things are happening, and they could impact not so much market prices, but stock market prices. Because if I'm looking at a great oil company, it's got a great dividend. Its cash flows are down now, but if its cash flows are going to be truncated in 2025 by solar and nuclear fusion, then I'm discounting 10 years of cash flows instead of 100 years. That's going to have a big hit on the stock. So I think the question is it impacting stock market values? Is it impacting stock market values, or is it impacting, oil and gas prices? I would say it's probably impacting oil and gas prices, stock market values, not so much oil and gas prices. That's really fracking and digital technology.
Huh. Wow. Well, we are poised to adopt some new energy standard for sure, if the iron grip of the old world would let it happen. And I guess this brings me to something that I have to tell you I hear a lot, especially now. And, there's a lot of people out there who ask me why you don't run for president. It seems like a number of people want to support you in that way and think of you as a natural for that position. Is it far-fetched here in 2016 that you would consider running for president?
Well, this gets back to the red button problem. Do you remember my red button story?
Yes, this is a great story. Can you do an outline of that here?
I was at a spiritual conference on helping our society evolve spiritually. And a friend of mine had asked me to give a speech called How the Money Works on Organized Crime. And I was talking about narcotics trafficking. The Department of Justice had just told a reporter I was working with in 1998 that the U.S. economy launders $500 billion to $1 trillion of all dirty money. And so I asked this wonderful group of spiritually evolved people, what would happen if we stopped being the global leader in money laundering? They said, well, the stock market would go down because that money would go to Zurich and Hong Kong, and we'd have trouble financing the government deficits. Our taxes might go up and our government checks might stop. And I said, okay, let's pretend there's a big red button on the lectern. And if you push this button, you can stop all hard narcotics trafficking in your county, your state, your country tomorrow. Who here will push the button? And out of 100 people dedicated to evolving our society spiritually, only one would push the button. So I asked the 99 that wouldn't. I said, why would you not push the button? And they said, we don't want our government checks to stop. We don't want our taxes to go up. And we don't want, our 401ks and IRAs to go down. So the reality is I'm a red button pusher.
Right.
And 1% of the population would support me in doing that. Now, I think it was probably more, but the reality is we don't need to push the red button. We need to turn the red button green. So we need to make money pushing the red button, and we need to realign the stock market with people. So my indicator for neighborhoods is the popsicle index. And the popsicle index is the percent of people in a neighborhood who believe a child can leave their home, go to the nearest place to buy a popsicle, and come home alone safely. So for my entire lifetime, as we've centralized the economy, the popsicle index is going down and the Dow Jones index is going up. And what I was working on and proposing in the 90s was we need the Dow Jones index and the popsicle index to make friends and go up and down together. So we need a win-lose model. A win-win model. We're in a win-lose. Okay. You can't do that unless you get a sufficient number of people who are willing to deal with the truth and turn the red button green. Okay. And the reality is that process requires a real bottom-up constituency. No big change is going to happen in the federal government unless you get 80% of the population on board. And if you look at the campaign, what do people want? They want someone who says, I promise you're going to get your check, and don't worry about what's going on. You're a good Christian, or you're a good progressive, or you're a good whatever. It's not your fault. So they want to hear a fantasy. They don't want to hear, oh, we have to take responsibility. We have to change. There's 8.5 trillion. Let's go get it back. Those are all very uncomfortable truths. And I always tell this story. Many years ago, somebody tried to get me to run for president in New Hampshire, not because they thought I could win, but because they thought I could bring transparency to these issues. And so I wrote an article saying why I declined to run for presidency in the United States. And I had a relative who called me and said, well, what would it take? What would it take to get you to run for president? I want the list. Give me the list of what I would have to arrange for you to get you to run. So I said, okay, the first thing I would need, I forget what number I had. I would need 250 licenses to kill with no question. And they blew up and they said, that is so immoral. I said, how do you expect me to run an organized crime syndicate without the authority to enforce. And they said, never mind, and hung up. Now,
Oh boy.
here's the nub of this. I consider myself, as you, a leader of the pro-decentralization team.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? Anybody who runs for president is on the centralization team. Why would you tell one of your strongest leaders to go work for the other team?
Right.
Okay? I don't want to work for the pro-centralization team. I want to work for the pro-decentralization team. Because what we need to do is not take our leaders and send them to work for the other team. What we need to do is attract their leaders onto our team, and we need to shift the money. So we need to shift, we need to bring the blood back out of the toes and the fingers on the, it's being centralized, and bring it back to ground zero. And so, I have no interest in running for president because I've worked for the pro-centralization team. And by my calculation, they owe me a great deal of money. I have no intention of working with them until and unless my money gets restored.
Yeah.
I want to work with the pro-decentralization team, right?
Absolutely.
And now we're having a battle, and and I don't want to work for the enemy,
Exactly.
especially when they owe me money. Because if I worked for them as a president, I wouldn't get paid anywhere near what they owe me.
There's no question about it.
Well, no, but here's the thing. I mean, this is inside baseball. If you go to work for people after they've stolen from you before you get the money back, they're never going to respect you.
Sure.
That's just, unless you have 250 licenses to kill.
Exactly, or at least a license to ill. You make an excellent point, though, which is the centralization team would absorb all that talent and strength to resist it by getting them to work on their team. So that's not the answer. But since we're on the decentralization versus centralization idea here, let's go with this. How is the decentralization team doing here right now in 2016?
We're getting run over at every turn. And I will tell you the number one reason we're not doing well is because all the people who will benefit from decentralization are too busy watching the presidential campaign and supporting members of the pro-centralization team. It's really interesting. I'll never forget when I first joined the pro-decentralization team, I was out giving one of my first speeches, and someone came up and said, well, we have no leadership here. And I said, well, wait a minute. I've been here a week. You have this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy and this guy. And, you've got fabulous leaders here. And they are doing great things. And they are really protecting your popsicle index. And they are fighting for your money. They're fabulous. What do you mean you have no leaders? And they said, yeah, but, those people aren't important. And I listened and listened. And what I realized was, the corporate media is not promoting them and Harvard is not giving them awards. I said, wait a minute. I mean, you need your enemy to authenticate your leaders before you can support them?
Ridiculous.
We are really toast. And I believe that. I believe that we keep looking to our enemies for authenticate who our leaders are and who we should support. And that means, as a culture, the people who believe in freedom are still in a very naive and insecure place. So, my dream has always been to do Solari, both what I'm doing with the Solari report and investment advisory. And I want to have the integrity to do that. And I assure you, you cannot have that integrity if you're on the pro-centralization team, unless you want to spend another 11 years playing enemy of the state again, which is, they don't need that and I don't need that.
Yeah, the sequel, one more go around. Well, I will say this much. I do relate to people who say this because I also want to have someone in the race who carries the real issues and brings them to the fore. So I guess we could say you're the candidate for the decentralization team for sure. So, although I do understand why you wouldn't want to run in this environment.
It's not, I never like to say never, but the chances, we have a better chance of the Martians landing tomorrow in front of cameras and of me running for president.
I bet the off-world cultures would want you in there too.
But it's a great way to get rid of the great, pro-decentralization leaders. You try and talk them into competing for spots on the pro-centralization team, and you just you waste a huge amount of time and money.
Yes, I see what you're saying. Well, it could be an idea born of idealism, of how we want things to be, in a sense. So enlightened people, good people, are looking at the situation and saying, here's someone who has government experience, who knows money, who has integrity, who knows the system, finally. And, of course, there's some of this that was happening with Ron Paul also. So I think people do look at you and say, she'd be an ideal candidate to fix this mess. I'd support her. From that perspective, it seems like a natural choice. But I think what you're pointing out is that in our 2016 political reality here in America now, that isn't the road to real change.
It's not the best use of my talents to contribute to change. If you look at the Kennedy assassination, the Secret Service basically participated.
Mm-hmm.
So think of the Secret Service not as a group that protects the president. They do in some respect, but also that makes sure the president is doing what Mr. Global wants. So if you think I want to walk around surrounded by people who would kill me in a flat second if I didn't do what Mr. Global wants, that's not a good use of my time.
Well, it is a good point. It could get dicey in there pretty fast. It is interesting to consider that 50 years after the JFK assassination, people still do understand on some innate level that the deep state arranged for his public execution. So we still see polls now where 70% don't believe the official story that was put out, with Oswald and the absurd magic bullet and all that nonsense. So they reject that state propaganda on a gut level, to their credit. So I can't help but think that in some deep part of themselves, they want the presidency back, and that this is what we're talking about in a sense.
Right. The story is rejected a lot, but people also know, they believe that they have fiduciary obligations to their family, their kids, whatever, and there's no point in going there. And so you have these various reactions where in truth they don't buy the official story, but in reality they're not going to go there, they're not going to look at it, they don't want to hear about it. It's kind of a coping mechanism. So, I've had a lot of people, and I'm a great believer that in sort of all my dealings, what I try and do, I believe I have a moral obligation to use my knowledge to help the person that I'm talking to or interacting with be successful.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not my job to judge your purpose in life. That's between you and your divine creator. And it's my job to use my knowledge in a way that gives you energy, in a way that gives me energy, because that's how we optimize our time and energy. So I deal with a lot of people who have no interest in knowing anything that is in my wrap-up. It just is, I don't want to know. I just watch the Super Bowl and have fun this weekend with the kids. And you know something? I totally respect that. So my question to them is, well, how can I use my knowledge to help you succeed? And I have a wonderful ally who once came to me, threw open the door, and she said, I told my husband, I got it. She always knows what's going to happen before it happens. So she said, here's how we're gonna get along. When I need to do something, you just call me and say, just do this. And I won't ask you why I'm doing it. I won't ask you what's going to happen, and I'll just do it. Okay? And then I'm okay, but I don't want to know what you know. I don't want to know how you know. I don't want to know what's behind the scenes on this. I just tell me what to do and I'll do it. And that's how we'll get along. And so that's what we do. We just, so I think it's really, really important as we go through a period where if we can close this divergency and alleviate the secrecy and alleviate the privilege, we go through a process where we really commit to help each other use our knowledge to give each other energy instead of, scare or tear down or destroy. Because what we're trying to do is pull together back around behind the covenant.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. You have the JFK quote there in the wrap-up.
Yes,
It's really an amazing quote.
it was. They're my two favorite. That's one of my great favorites.
Let's listen to it now.
The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society. And we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings. We decided long ago that the dangers of excessive and unwarranted concealment of pertinent facts far outweighed the dangers which are cited to justify it. Even today, there is little value in opposing the threat of a closed society by imitating its arbitrary restrictions. Even today, there is little value in ensuring the survival of our nation if our traditions do not survive with it. And there is very grave danger that an announced need for increased security will be seized upon by those anxious to expand its meaning to the very limits of official censorship and concealment. That I do not intend to permit to the extent that it's in my control.
Really powerful and very pertinent to today, I'd say. I know you love that one. So what is the other one?
It's my other great favorite. I've told you before, but I just have to mention again because I love Eisenhower, and I know he's not perfect. I'm going to get emails saying he killed all those German soldiers. Yes, I know. But I think Eisenhower did a lot to stand down the military-industrial complex and tried to brief Kennedy to help Kennedy stand them down, and was fearless in standing them down. But my favorite was when Eisenhower created the executive order to put the CIA in charge of, well, he created Area 51, then he put the CIA in charge of security, but then they shut him out. They wouldn't report. So they were stonewalling Eisenhower. Eisenhower, according to the report, and I believe it's true, picked up the phone. Remember, he's a very successful general who commands the respect of the military. He picks up the phone and calls the CIA and says, if you're not in my office tomorrow with a full report, I am flying to California. I am getting the I forget which first, the 81st, one of the armies, and I am invading Area 51.
Excellent. Yeah.
And the CIA was in its office the next day reporting. So, but imagine if they're prepared to stonewall Eisenhower and bring Eisenhower to the point where he's going to invade Area 51, imagine where they are now.
Yes,
You know?
absolutely. Yeah. And what will it take to stop them? I guess we'll cover that in the next episode. Catherine, just incredible work. The wrap-up space, here we go, Solari.com. So much quality information there and commentary. So thank you so much for being on the show, and we'll talk soon.
Well, I appreciate it.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on. Thank you for joining me for this fascinating Part 2 episode of the UFO Economy 3.0 with former Assistant Housing Secretary Catherine Austin Fitts. You can find more special reports, deep interviews, and documentaries at www.darkjournalist.com. You can also subscribe here to our YouTube channel for the latest videos. See you soon.